and Potter was just standing there, like he agreed with the whole thing. Harry stopped walking. He was 3 steps from the alcove near the main stairs, close enough to see the 2 Hufflepuff girls inside, but not close enough for them to have noticed him yet. "Are you sure?" the second girl said. "I thought he just watched." "Same thing, isn't it?" The first girl, round-faced, her hair in a braid, lowered her voice. "He's Slytherin now. Of course he didn't stop it." Harry's hand tightened on his bag strap. "My cousin said Malfoy grabbed the Ravenclaw boy's wrist, twisted it. I heard he shoved him into the wall first." That wasn't what happened. Harry had been there. Draco had grabbed the boy's wrist for maybe 3 seconds. No twisting, no wall. But the girls kept talking. "And Snape took points from the Ravenclaw. Can you believe that? That's Slytherin for you." Harry stepped into view. Both girls went silent. The one with the braid gave him a small, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Morning," she said. Harry didn't respond. He walked past them toward the great hall, his jaw tight, his footsteps too loud against the stone floor. Behind him, the whispering started again. The great hall felt smaller than usual. Harry sat at the end of the Slytherin table, his plate filling itself with food he didn't want. Across the hall, the Gryffindor gable was loud with morning conversation. Ron was there, talking with his mouth full, while the twins laughed at something. Ron glanced over. His eyes met Harry's. Then he looked away. It was fast, barely a second, but Harry felt it like a door closing. He looked down at his eggs. A group of Ravenclaws walked past the Slytherin table. One of them, a second-year boy with glasses, whispered something to his friend. They both looked back at Harry. Harry's fork scraped against his plate. Further down the table, Draco was holding court. His voice carried over the low hum of breakfast conversation. "My father wrote back about the corridor incident, said Snape handled it exactly right, showed those Ravenclaws they can't just barrel through people and expect no consequences." Pansy leaned in. "Did you see his face when Snape took the points? Thought he was going to cry." Crabbe snorted. Daphne sat across from Draco, her expression neutral. She caught Harry's eye for just a moment, then looked back to her plate. Harry stood. His chair scraped loudly against the stone floor. A few heads turned. He left. The library was quieter. Harry found his usual spot tucked between the history and herbology sections and dropped his bag on the table harder than he meant to. The sound echoed. Madame Pince looked up sharply from her desk, her expression severe. Harry sat down quickly and pulled out his potions textbook. He'd been staring at the same page for 5 minutes when someone sat down across from him. Ron. Harry looked up, startled. Ron's ears were red. He wasn't quite meeting Harry's eyes. "Hey," Ron said. "Hi." Ron pulled at a loose thread on his robes. "So, I heard about the thing with the Ravenclaw?" Harry's stomach sank. "Right. People are saying you were like part of it with Malfoy." Ron finally looked at him. "That's not true, though, is it?" "I was there, but I wasn't part of anything." "That's what I thought." Ron nodded, but he still looked uncomfortable. "It's just, my brothers were asking about it, and some of the other Gryffindors. They think what?" He hesitated. "They think you're going dark or something, because you're in Slytherin, and because you didn't stop Malfoy." "I couldn't stop him. It happened too fast." "I know. I figured." Ron's voice dropped. "But people don't really care what actually happened. They just care what it looks like." Harry stared at him. Ron stood. "Look, I'm not saying I think that, about you going dark or whatever. I wanted to tell you what people are saying, because you should know." "Right. Thanks." Ron shifted his weight. "I should get to herbology, but yeah, just thought you should know." He left. Harry sat there, staring at the empty chair. Ron had come to warn him. That was something. But he'd also left quickly, like being seen with Harry was a risk. Harry closed his textbook and shoved it back in his bag. Charms was worse. Harry arrived early and took his usual seat beside Nott. The Ravenclaws filed in on the other side of the room, careful, deliberate, quiet. The short-haired girl from the corridor incident sat near the front. She didn't look at the Slytherins. When Professor Flitwick entered, he was carrying a stack of parchment. Good morning," he said brightly. "Before we begin today's lesson, I have the weekly house point standings to announce." Harry's stomach dropped. Flitwick pulled out a small piece of parchment and perched it on his stack of books. Ravenclaw is in the lead with 73 points. Well done, well done. Gryffindor follows with 68. Hufflepuff has 62. He paused. And Slytherin has 59. A few Ravenclaws glanced at the Slytherins. One of them smirked. Flitwick didn't seem to notice. Now then, today we'll be continuing our work on the levitation charm. I expect to see improvement from last week. Harry stopped listening. 59 points. Slytherin had been ahead last week, he was sure of it. Beside him, Nott was very still. When the lesson ended, Harry packed his bag quickly, and he was halfway to the door when Flitwick called out, "Mr. Potter, a moment, please." Harry stopped. The other students filed out. Nott glanced back once, then left. Flitwick hopped down from his stack of books and approached him, his expression kind but serious. "I wanted to check in with you, Harry, see how you're settling into your classes." "I'm fine, Professor." "Good, good." He hesitated. "I also wanted to say there's been some talk among the students about the incident in the corridor last week." Harry's chest tightened. "I don't put much stock in gossip, but I do think it's important that you understand how these things can evolve. Perceptions can harden quickly at your age." "I didn't do anything, Professor." "I believe you, but I also want you to consider that sometimes doing nothing can be interpreted as doing something. Do you understand?" Harry didn't respond. He patted his shoulder. "Just something to think about. You may go." Harry left. He didn't see Hermione until after lunch. She was waiting outside the Transfiguration classroom, her bag slung over her shoulder and her arms crossed. "Harry," he stopped. "Hi. Can we talk?" "I guess." She pulled him aside, away from the other students trickling toward the classroom. Her expression was serious. "I know what people are saying about you." "Yeah, everyone does, apparently." "Is it true?" Harry's jaw tightened. "I was in the corridor, yes." "And you didn't stop him?" "There was nothing to stop. He grabbed the kid's wrist for like 3 seconds. That's it." "That's it?" Hermione's voice sharpened. "Harry, he grabbed someone, and you just stood there?" "What was I supposed to do?" "Say something." She stepped closer. "Tell him it was wrong. Tell him to let go. Tell someone what actually happened instead of letting everyone think you agreed with it." Harry stared at her. "I didn't agree with it." "Then why didn't you say so?" Because, he stopped. His hands curled into fists. "Because it doesn't matter what I say. I'm in Slytherin. No one's going to believe me anyway." "That's not true." "Yes, it is." Harry's voice rose. "Everyone already knows what happened." Hermione's expression flickered, something like guilt maybe, or doubt. "Harry, I have to get to class." He pushed past her into the Transfiguration classroom and took a seat at the back. Hermione entered a moment later. She sat at the front, near the Gryffindors. She didn't look back. That night, Harry didn't go to the common room. He walked instead, down corridors, through empty classrooms, past windows that showed nothing but darkness and distant stars. He replayed the conversation with Hermione in his head, then Dean's, then the Hufflepuff girls in the alcove. Turning into one of them. You didn't do anything. You just stood there. They were all saying the same thing, just with different words. And the worst part was, they weren't wrong. He had just stood there. But what they didn't understand, what no one seemed to understand, was that doing something would have been just as bad. If he'd stepped forward, defended Draco, he'd be proving them right. If he'd argued against Draco, he'd be breaking the unity Snape demanded. There was no right answer, just different ways to lose. Harry stopped in front of a window overlooking the grounds. The lake stretched out below, black and still. He hadn't chosen any of this. He hadn't chosen Slytherin. He hadn't chosen to stand in that corridor. He hadn't chosen to have people watch him and interpret his silence as agreement. But it didn't matter. The story was already moving, growing, changing shape every time someone retold it. And he didn't do anything to stop it. Because the story wasn't about what he'd actually done. It was about what people believed he'd done. And belief, he was learning, moved faster than truth. Harry pressed his forehead against the cold glass and closed his eyes. Somewhere below, the lake shifted in the wind. And somewhere else, someone was probably telling another version of the story, adding details that weren't true, removing ones that were, making Harry into something he wasn't, an idea, not a person. And ideas, he realized, didn't need permission to spread. They just did.